The internet is a noisy place. Let this channel be your quiet harbor. I'm here to tell you a tale, and you're here to rest. A perfect alliance. Let us begin. The wind that swept through the Dimrill Dale that evening was cold and thin, carrying with it the whisper of long-forgotten laments. Clouds moved low over the mountain peaks, and the light of the westering sun struck upon the walls of the misty mountains like pale gold upon stone. Beneath that fading glow stood a company of dwarves, their mail gleaming faintly, and their eyes fixed upon the shadowed cliffs before them. At their head was Thrain, son of Thror, heir to the kingdom under the mountain. His beard was dark with silver at the edges, his face proud but weary, and in his eyes burned the deep fire of his people, a hunger to reclaim what had been lost. At his side walked Nar, his old companion, who bore the company's map and the runes of guidance carved upon stone. Around them, 7 more dwarves bore packs of gear and weapons, grim-faced and silent, for all knew the place they sought, Khazad-dûm, the Black Pit, Moria. No bird flew above the vale. No beast dared stir among the rocks, for Moria had long been a place of dread. The dwarves of old had delved too deep and wakened a terror that none could master. The Balrog of Morgoth had come forth in fire and shadow, and Durin, the Deathless, had perished beneath its flame. His people had fled, and the halls of stone that once rang with hammer and song had fallen to darkness. Orcs, goblins, and worse, had made their dens in the deeps. Yet still, the dwarves remembered their glory, and still they dreamed of their return. Thrain stood at the base of the cliffs and traced his hand along a smooth wall of rock, half hidden beneath moss and lichen. There, barely visible beneath the growth, were faint dwarven runes. "Here lies the east gate of Durin's lesser way," he murmured, "a door of stone, made before even the western gates were built. Few know of it now." Nar crouched beside him, brushing away the moss with his gloved hand. Aye, and fewer still would dare open it. The orcs prowl the upper halls, and deep below. He paused, his voice growing low. Deep below, other things stir. There are tales, Thrain, of shadows that do not sleep. Thrain's gaze did not waver. Aye, I have heard them. But I do not come to challenge the darkness, only to reclaim what was ours. In the depths, there lies Durin's forge, the anvil of our fathers. With it, the craftsmanship of old may yet be restored. He placed his hand upon the runes and whispered a word in Khuzdul, the secret tongue of the dwarves. The runes glimmered faintly, gold light rippling along the cracks of the stone like veins of fire. With a deep groan, the rock began to part. Dust fell from the ceiling, and a narrow opening yawned before them, black as a wound in the mountain's flesh. A cold breath issued forth, stale and heavy with age. The dwarves lit their lanterns, and one by one they stepped into the darkness. The sound of their boots echoed faintly through the empty halls. They descended along a sloping passage, walls lined with carved pillars, the work of ancient hands. The carvings told of Durin's line, kings crowned beneath the mountain, miners raising hammers, smiths at their forges. Dust lay thick upon every stone, and the air was still as death. As they passed deeper, Thrain felt a weight upon his heart. He remembered the songs his father had sung in the exile of Erebor, songs of the halls of Khazad-dûm, where light once fell from shining lamps and rivers of mithril gleamed. Those songs had kindled the fire in him that now burned fierce and bright. Yet here, beneath the mountain, that fire felt cold. They came at last to a vast chamber, its roof lost in shadow. A broken bridge crossed a chasm, and the far side vanished into darkness. Thrain raised his lantern high. The light caught the edges of shattered statues and fallen stonework. "This was once the Hall of Guardians," said Nar softly. "Here the wardens of Durin kept watch. It is said the forges of the lower halls could be reached from here." Thrain nodded. "Then this is our road." But even as he spoke, a faint sound drifted from the depths beyond the bridge, the clatter of stone, the scrape of metal. Every dwarf froze. The echoes swelled, then faded, as though something vast had moved in the dark. "Orcs," muttered one of the younger dwarfs, tightening his grip on his axe. Nar shook his head slowly. No, that was not the tread of orcs. A silence followed, heavy and long. Then Thrain spoke, his voice calm but firm. "We came for the forge. We will not turn back now." So they crossed the broken bridge, their lanterns flickering like stars in the void. Beyond lay a narrow stair spiraling downward into the deeps. The walls grew rougher, the carvings fewer, and the air thick with dust and damp. Far below, a faint red glow pulsed, the reflection of hidden fire. Thrain halted. "The lower forges are near." But Nar's eyes were upon the shadows that stretched behind them. "May Durin guard us," he murmured. And so, into the ancient dark they went. 9 dwarves, seeking the relic of their fathers, unaware of what the dungeons of Moria still kept waiting in the depths below. The mountain groaned above them. Far away, unseen, something stirred. Something that had slept long in the dark and had begun, now, to wake. The stair wound downward in endless turns, worn smooth by feet that had long since turned to dust. The flicker of the dwarves' lanterns threw trembling shadows along the stone, and every echo of their boots returned to them multiplied, so that it seemed the mountain whispered back their steps. The deeper they went, the more the air grew heavy, as if the weight of the world above pressed upon them. After what felt like hours, they reached a landing where the stair opened into a low hall, supported by columns thick as tree trunks. A dark stream ran beside the path, trickling faintly, its water black and cold. Here the air carried the faint tang of iron and ash, a scent that stirred old memories in Thrain's heart. "Here they smelted mithril in the elder days," said Nar, running a hand along one of the columns. The veins ran deep through these halls. It was said that the walls themselves shone when the forges burned bright. Thrain nodded, but his eyes were upon the far wall, where a great iron door stood half buried in rubble. The hinges were rusted, yet faint runes could still be seen upon it, glimmering faintly in their lantern light. "The mark of Durin's smiths," he murmured. "We draw near." As the company began to clear the stones away, a soft sound echoed through the dark, a whisper, thin as the sigh of the wind. One of the younger dwarves, Brogri by name, turned sharply. "Did you hear that?" Nar listened, frowning. "Aye, it came from the tunnel behind us." They raised their lanterns, but the passage was empty, swallowed in black. Yet the whisper came again, faint but near, as though someone breathed just beyond the reach of their light. "Voices," said Brogri, gripping his axe. "They're following us." Thrain's tone was steady. "Or they are before us. Keep your weapons ready, but make no haste. The mountain echoes, and shadows play tricks in the dark." Still, as they worked, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. At last, with a groan of old metal, the iron door gave way. Dust billowed out in a grey cloud. The dwarves coughed and lifted their lanterns high. Beyond lay a vast forge hall, the roof supported by pillars carved with hammers and crowns. The forges themselves stood silent, their hearths long cold. Scattered across the floor were old tools, broken and rusted, and the bones of dwarves who had died at their posts. Nar bowed his head. Here they made wonders beyond count, he said softly, and here they fell, faithful to the end. Thrain stepped forward, eyes sweeping the hall. At its far end, upon a dais of black stone, stood an anvil, great and square, veined with silver that caught their lantern light. Upon its face was the rune of Durin. "Durin's forge," Thrain whispered. "By Mahal, we have found it." For a long moment, none spoke. They felt as though they stood in a holy place, where the breath of their ancestors still lingered. Thrain approached the anvil and placed his hand upon it. The metal was cold, yet beneath the surface, he thought he felt a faint pulse, as if the forger's heart still beat. Then came a noise, faint at first, but growing. The clatter of metal on stone, the echo of footsteps. The dwarves turned sharply. From the shadows at the edge of the hall came figures, stooping and dark. Their armor was crude, their eyes gleaming red. "Orcs!" cried Brogri. The first wave came shrieking, blades flashing in the lantern light. The dwarves formed a circle around the anvil, axes raised. The clash was sudden and fierce. Sparks flew as steel met steel. Thrain cleaved an orc helm with a shout, while Nar brought down his hammer upon another's skull. "Hold fast," Thrain called, "for Durin's house." The orcs pressed hard, more pouring in from the shadows. Yet the dwarves fought like the smiths of old, their axes singing in the dark. One by one the orcs fell, until at last their cries faded, and the hall was still again. The dwarves stood panting among the fallen. Blood stained the stones, and the echoes of the battle lingered like ghosts. Thrain looked to his company. 2 wounded, 1 fallen. He set his jaw. "We cannot stay. The noise will bring more of them." Nar nodded grimly. "Aye, but look, beyond the forge." Behind the dais, half hidden by broken masonry, was a narrow passage leading deeper into the rock. Upon its lintel were carved the words in ancient runes. "To the dungeons of Moria, keep of the last guard." A chill passed through the company. Even the air beyond that door seemed darker. Brogri spat. "I've heard tell of those dungeons. Cursed, they say. A place where the last of Durin's folk made their stand and vanished." Thrain's gaze was drawn to the passage, a fire kindling in his eyes. "Then there may yet be more relics of our fathers within. Perhaps the treasures they guarded to the end." Nar frowned. "Or the doom that took them. The forge is found, Thrain. Let us take what we can and leave before the mountain wakes further." But Thrain shook his head. "No, the forge must not be left unguarded. If the orcs return, they will defile it. We must know what lies beyond, if any hope remains of reclaiming these halls." The company hesitated, torn between fear and duty. At last, they gathered their courage and pressed onward. The passage beyond was narrow, the walls rough and damp. The air was colder here, and a faint sound could be heard, a slow, steady rhythm, like breathing. The dwarves moved in silence, their lanterns casting circles of trembling light. After a time, they came to a vast gate of stone, its surface carved with the 7 stars and crown of Durin. The gate stood slightly ajar, and from the darkness beyond came a faint red glow. Pulsing like the heart of some great beast, Thrain raised his lantern. "What the dungeons of Moria keep," he murmured, "we shall soon know." He pushed the gate wide. The light spilled into the space beyond, and every dwarf froze. Before them stretched a chamber unlike any they had seen, a cavernous hall descending into fire-lit pits. Chains hung from the ceiling, and among the shadows moved shapes, small, hunched, glimmering with eyes pale as frost. One of the creatures turned its face towards them, and Nar drew in a sharp breath. "By the Maker, those are dwarves!" Yet they were not. Their skin was ashen, their hair white as cobwebs. Their eyes shone with a cold light, and their movements were slow, deliberate, bound by some unseen will. Around their necks hung fragments of broken armor, bearing the crest of Durin. A hollow voice echoed through the hall. "Who disturbs the last guard of Khazad-dûm?" The dwarf stood speechless, hearts pounding. Thrain stepped forward, his voice trembling but resolute. "We are your kin. We come to reclaim what was lost. I am Thrain, son of Thror, heir of Durin's line." The pale figures stirred, and one stepped forth, taller than the rest, clad in blackened mail. His eyes burned faintly red. "Durin's line is ended," he said. "We were left to guard the relics of our fathers. But in the dark, we were forgotten. The fire of Moria claimed us, and now we are bound to it." The company stood frozen. The sound of the red fire rose, and the shadows deepened around them. Nar whispered, "Durin, protect us. They live, and yet they do not." And in that moment, Thrain understood what horror the dungeons of Moria kept. Not gold nor treasure, but the last watchman of Durin's realm, twisted and enslaved by the ancient darkness that still ruled the deeps. A low growl echoed from the depths beyond, and the red light brightened like a sunrise of fire. The pale dwarves turned their faces toward it, and the captain of the dead guard spoke once more, a voice like grinding stone. "He wakes. The keeper stirs." And the mountain trembled. The tremor rolled through the stone like a living thing, shaking dust from the ceiling and sending cracks crawling across the walls. The lanterns in the dwarves' hands swayed wildly as they stumbled to keep their footing. From deep within the cavern came a low, thunderous sound. Not a voice, yet something like a growl that reverberated through the bones. The pale figures, those twisted remnants of dwarves, fell to their knees as one, bowing their heads toward the fiery chasm that opened beyond. Thrain steadied himself against the gate. "Hold your ground," he cried, though his voice quavered beneath the weight of the unseen presence. Nar's face had gone pale beneath his beard. "That sound, Thrain. It is no beast of flesh. There is a will behind it." From the pits below, red light rose in waves, staining the chamber with its glow. The air grew thick, hot and heavy with the scent of ash. Within the haze, shapes began to move. Faint at first, then clearer. Vast pillars, half seen, and a black archway leading to depths yet unlit. The hunched dwarves, the bound guard, began to chant in voices hollow and low. The words were in Khuzdul, but twisted, broken by the echo of centuries. "Who wakes? The keeper. Who breaks? The seal." Thrain's hand tightened upon the haft of his axe. He looked upon the leader of the Pale Ones, that once dwarf whose eyes burned red beneath a crown of corroded iron. "What is the keeper?" Thrain demanded. "What power holds you in thrall?" The creature lifted his gaze, and for a heartbeat, something of a dwarf's pride flickered there, though it was quickly smothered by the shadow that bound him. The fire that devoured Durin's halls, the flame that slew our king, it sought to claim us, but we resisted. For our defiance, it cursed us. We are the watchers, the chained. When it sleeps, we keep its vigil. When it stirs, we bow. Nar's voice trembled. "The Balrog." The word itself seemed to chill the air, but the pale captain shook his head slowly. Not he. The Balrog fell long ago beneath the eastward depths, broken by time. What remains is his breath, his wrath, the shadow that lingers. It is the Keeper, a fragment of the terror that was once whole, and now it wakes again. The dwarves of Thrain's company exchanged fearful glances. Brogri muttered, "We must flee, Thrain." There's no forge nor crown worth dying for in this pit. But Thrain's eyes were fixed on the anvil of Durin, gleaming faintly through the red mist behind them. If this thing rises, it will spread beyond these walls. It will devour all that remains of our father's work. We must seal the dungeons again, forever. Before any could answer, the chamber shuddered once more, and a great gust of heat rushed upward. The ground split, sending a spray of molten stone across the floor. From the heart of the fire, something vast began to move, a form half hidden by smoke and flame. The bound guard turned their faces toward it, crying out in one voice, "The Keeper comes!" And out of the fire stepped a figure of shadow and cinder, not the towering demon of legend, but a remnant of its might, shaped like a dwarf yet wreathed in flame. Its eyes burned white-hot, and its breath was smoke. It bore no weapon, but in its hand it carried chains of glowing iron that hissed where they touched the ground. Thrain felt the weight of its gaze and stumbled back a pace. "In the name of Durin," he said, "you will not pass beyond this place." The creature laughed, a deep, echoing sound like the roar of a forge fire. "Durin is ash," it said. "His sons are dust. I am the fire that remains. You come seeking what the dungeons keep? Then behold, I am its keeper." With that, it struck the ground, and the chains lashed outward like serpents of flame. The dwarves leapt aside, axes flashing. One chain wrapped around Brogri's leg. He cried out as the metal burned through mail and flesh alike. Thrain swung his axe with all his might, severing the chain, and the broken link hissed and smoked upon the floor. "Fall back!" Nar shouted. "To the gate!" But the bound guard moved to block their retreat, faces blank, eyes glowing. They advanced in a slow, terrible rhythm, their axes raised. Thrain snarled. "Then we fight!" The chamber erupted into chaos, flame and steel, shadow and cries. The Keeper's chains swept through the air like living fire, striking columns and sending shards of stone flying. The bound guard pressed the dwarves hard, their strength unnatural, their wounds bleeding not red but black. Thrain's company fought with the fury of despair, cutting down foe after foe, yet for each that fell, another seemed to rise from the red mist. Nar struck one of the pale dwarves square upon the helm, shattering it, and beneath he saw not a face, but a hollow cavity, filled with embers. He recoiled in horror. "They are empty! Spirits bound to fire and stone!" Thrain's axe cleaved through two more of them, and he turned toward the dais. "The forge!" he shouted. "The forge is our only hope!" He leapt atop the black anvil, raising his weapon high. "By Durin's hand, I claim this forge in the name of his heirs." The rune upon the anvil flared, a brilliant blue light that cut through the red haze. The Keeper recoiled, hissing as though struck. The bound guard faltered. Nar's eyes widened. "The forge remembers its master." Thrain seized the moment. "Now, Nar! The door! Seal it!" Nar and two others heaved the gate shut. The stone ground against stone with a sound like thunder. As it closed, the Keeper roared, the sound rising in pitch until the very walls quaked. One final lash of flame struck through the narrowing gap, catching one of the dwarves full in the chest. He fell without a cry, consumed in fire. Then the door shut with a thunderous boom, and the chamber fell into darkness, save for the fading glow of the rune upon the forge. For a long moment, no one spoke. Only the hiss of cooling metal and the panting of the survivors filled the air. At last, Thrain stepped down from the anvil, his face grey with exhaustion. "It is done," he said quietly. "The Keeper is bound again." Nar leaned upon his hammer, his eyes hollow. At what cost? Thrain looked about. Of the 9 who had entered Moria, only 5 remained. Smoke curled from the edges of their beards, and soot stained their armor. Yet Thrain's gaze hardened. We will bear the forge to the upper halls. No hand of darkness shall ever wield it again. As they turned to depart, Thrain cast one last glance at the sealed gate. The runes along its edges glowed faintly, as though something pressed from within. A whisper reached his ears, a voice low and distant, echoing from beyond the stone. Durin's heir, the fire remembers. He shuddered, and without another word, he led his weary company back into the stairway above. Behind them, in the dungeons of Moria, the red light flickered once more, then faded into the dark, leaving only silence and the faint scent of smoke. For many hours they climbed through the narrow passages, each step a struggle against weariness and the stifling air. The heat from below still lingered, clinging to their armor, and the taste of ash burned in their throats. Yet Thrain pressed onward, his lantern casting a pale light upon the walls, his heart set on bearing Durin's forge out of the cursed deeps. Behind him walked Nar and 3 others, Dwalin, Fundar, and young Brogri's brother, Ori, whose eyes were dark with grief. None spoke. The silence between them was heavy as the stone itself. Only the slow, steady sound of boots against rock echoed faintly through the tunnels. At length they came again to the Hall of Guardians, where broken statues lay half buried in dust. The air here was cooler, and Thrain allowed himself a breath of relief. "Here we rest," he said. "A short while only. Then we press on to the east gate." They set down their burdens. The forge anvil, smaller now, its light dimmed since Thrain's cry in the lower chamber, rested upon a slab of stone between them. Its runes glowed faintly blue, pulsing as if with breath. Nar sat beside it, running his calloused fingers across the surface. "Still warm," he murmured. "There is power yet in this relic. It may be that Durin's hand himself touched it in the elder days." Thrain nodded, though his gaze was distant. "It is more than a relic, Nar. It is the last heart of our people's craft. I would see it returned to Erebor, where it may burn again beneath the hammers of the living." For a moment, the old dwarf said nothing. Then he looked up, his brow furrowed. "And what of Moria, Thrain? Will you leave it as it is, cursed and sealed?" Thrain's hand tightened upon the haft of his axe. "I would cleanse it if I could. But the darkness here is older than our memory. We have seen only a fragment of its power, and that nearly destroyed us." He turned his eyes toward the black archway that led further upward. "Let it sleep. The time of the dwarves in these halls has passed." The others nodded solemnly, though Ori's jaw was set hard. "My brother lies below," he said. "Burned by that thing. I would see it undone before I die." Thrain looked upon him with sorrow. "I know your pain, lad. But vengeance cannot conquer shadow. We can only carry the light away from it." Before Ori could answer, a faint tremor passed beneath their feet. Light but unmistakable. They froze. From somewhere deep behind them came a dull, distant rumble. Nar rose swiftly. "That sound again." "It cannot be the Keeper," said Dwalin. "We sealed the gate." "Stone cracks," Thrain murmured grimly, "and chains break." They hastened to gather their things. Thrain lifted the forge onto his shoulders, staggering under its weight. "Come, we cannot tarry." The stair they ascended now was steeper and narrower, winding through the heart of the mountain. The air grew fresher as they climbed, though at times a draught of foul wind blew from behind, as if the mountain exhaled smoke from its wounds. Hours passed. At last, the blackness ahead began to pale, and Thrain caught the faint scent of air from the world above, cold, sharp, and clean. His heart lifted. "The east gate is near," he said. "Hold fast, my friends. Soon we shall see the stars again." But as they entered the final passage, the light of their lanterns flickered strangely. The walls trembled, and a shadow passed before them, not cast by any flame of theirs, but rising from the rock itself. A whisper ran through the air, low, guttural, and hateful. "Durin's heir, you cannot flee fire with flesh." Thrain turned sharply, his voice rising in defiance. "Begone, shadow! You have no hold upon the living." The voice came again, closer now, echoing along the stone. "The forge burns still. The fire is mine. You bear my heart in your hands." And suddenly, the anvil in Thrain's grip flared with red light, so bright that the others fell back, shielding their eyes. The metal grew hot, smoke curling from its edges. Thrain cried out, but did not release it. "No, you shall not have it!" Nar leapt forward. "Drop it, Thrain! It will consume you!" But Thrain's eyes were wild, his teeth clenched. "If I release it, the shadow will follow. I will not give it back." The light grew blinding, and for a moment, the whole passage was filled with fire. Then, as suddenly as it came, the glow faded. Thrain fell to one knee, gasping, the forge dark and cold once more. The others gathered around him. Nar touched his shoulder. "Thrain, speak to me." The heir of Durin looked up slowly. His face was pale, and his voice was low. "It spoke to me, Nar. It called me by name. It knows the blood I bear." Nar's gaze darkened. "Then we must leave this place at once. That forge is bound to the shadow, a part of its being, perhaps." Thrain nodded weakly. "Aye. Yet it must not be left here. If the orcs reclaim it, they will feed it with their hatred, and the fire will live again." So they pressed on, though fear now walked with them. The light of the east gate grew brighter ahead, but with it came a new sound, the harsh clamor of iron and guttural voices. Dwalin crept forward and peered around the corner. "Orcs," he whispered. "A host of them. They guard the gate." Nar swore under his breath. "They've smelled the forge. The whole mountain will rise before long." Thrain's eyes narrowed. "Then we carve our road through them." He hefted his axe and stepped into the open. The east gate loomed before them, its ancient doors broken, moonlight spilling in through the cracks. Beyond lay the starlit dale and freedom. But between them and that light stood a score of orcs, their armor black and their eyes gleaming yellow. For a heartbeat, all was still. Then the nearest orc shrieked and charged. "Baruch Kazad! Kazad Aimenu!" Thrain roared, his voice echoing like thunder. The others followed, their axes flashing in the pale light. The clash was fierce, echoing through the ruined halls. Dwalin fell upon the first of them, splitting helm and skull alike. Ori fought with a fury born of grief, cleaving through two foes before a spear pierced his side. He stumbled but struck again, dragging the orc down with him. Thrain's axe found its mark again and again, but still the tide pressed closer. He fought his way to the threshold, the forge strapped upon his back. The night air struck his face, cold and sweet. "Nar," he cried, "the gate! Seal it behind us!" One by one they burst through, stumbling into the moonlight. Nar was the last, turning to hurl a torch into the tunnel behind. The dry timbers caught, and flames leapt up. The orcs shrieked and fell back. The dwarves staggered down into the dale, smoke and shadow billowing behind them. The mountain groaned, and for an instant the ground trembled beneath their feet. High above, sparks burst from the east gate like the breath of some dying furnace. When at last they paused, far from the cliffs, Thrain looked back. The mouth of Moria was silent again, but a faint red light pulsed deep within the darkness, slow, steady, and alive. Nar came to his side. "It will not rest," he said quietly. "No," Thrain answered, his eyes hard. "But neither shall it rain. Let the shadow rot beneath stone. What the dungeons of Moria keep, they shall keep until the ending of the world." He turned away, leading his weary companions eastward, toward the distant peaks where Erebor lay waiting. And behind them, unseen, the last ember of the Keeper flickered deep in the heart of the mountain, patient, watching, and dreaming once more of flame. Days passed as they journeyed eastward through the wilds, the shadows of the misty mountains shrinking behind them, though never fully gone from their hearts. The company that had entered Moria as 9 now numbered but 4, and they moved in grim silence, each step carrying the weight of what they had seen in the deeps. The land beyond the Dimril Dale lay cold and barren beneath the pale autumn sky. Thin grass whispered in the wind, and the bones of old trees jutted from the soil like fingers of the dead. Thrain walked foremost, the sacred anvil of Durin bound upon a sled of oak and iron that dragged behind him. Its runes no longer glowed, yet from time to time it would tremble faintly, as if something within it still breathed. He kept his eyes ever east, where beyond the long leagues of Wilderland rose the lonely crown of Erebor, the mountain of his fathers. Nar followed close, his old limbs weary but steadfast. The 2 younger dwarves, Dwalin and Fundar, carried the few supplies that remained, dried meat, water skins, and tools. They spoke little, for fear clung to them still. At night, when the fires burned low, they thought they heard whispers in the wind, echoes of the voices they had heard beneath the stone. On the 3rd night, as they camped beside a cold stream that flowed from the mountains, Nar approached Thrain, who sat apart, staring into the dark. The firelight glimmered on his mail, and in his hand he turned a small fragment of mithril, the only token he had taken from Moria. "You do not sleep," said Nar quietly. Thrain shook his head. "When I close my eyes, I see them. The bound guard, the forge burning red, the shadow that spoke my name. It is as if the mountain itself remembers me." Nar sat beside him, laying a heavy hand upon his shoulder. "You bear the burden of kings, Thrain. Such memory is both curse and crown." Thrain looked toward the east. "My father sought to reclaim Moria, and it cost him dear. I swore I would not follow him into folly. Yet even now, I feel the call of the dark. There was a time when I believed the Balrog's fall had ended that evil, but I was wrong. The fire endures. It spoke of Durin's line, as if it still had claim upon us. Why, Nar? What does the shadow know of our blood?" The old dwarf sighed. "It knows much. In the elder days when Morgoth ruled, many spirits of flame served him. They were not all slain when he fell. Some were bound to the earth, to its forges and fires. The Balrog of Moria was one such. Its essence may yet linger, feeding on the memory of what it once was. The forge you carry, it was wrought with the power of creation, but also of flame. The two cannot be wholly sundered." Thrain turned the mithril shard in his hand, the pale metal reflecting the firelight. "Then we bear a fragment of that curse with us." "Perhaps," Nar said, "but light and shadow are woven together in all things. It is the hand that wields the tool that makes it evil or good." Thrain nodded slowly, though the words gave him little peace. Above them, the wind shifted, and far away thunder rumbled beyond the eastern sky. By dawn, the clouds had gathered thick, and a cold rain fell as they broke camp. The land descended into rolling moors cut by streams and pools, and mist crept over the ground. The anvil weighed heavy upon its sled, and the rope cut into Thrain's shoulders. But he did not falter. As the day wore on, They came upon a line of stone ruins half buried in the earth, the remains of an old watchtower from some forgotten age. The stones were black with lichen, but one wall yet stood, offering shelter from the rain. They drew near and made camp beneath it. Dwalin and Fundar gathered what dry wood they could find, while Nar inspected the stones, tracing runes worn faint by time. "Men built this long ago," he said. "Perhaps even in the days when Khazad Dûm still thrived. A border post, mayhap." Thrain said nothing. His eyes were on the horizon, where the rain blurred the outline of the mountains. He felt a strange unease, a presence in the air, as though something watched them unseen. That night the rain ceased, and a wan moon rose between drifting clouds. The company lay sleeping, save Thrain, who sat awake beside the forge. He had wrapped it in cloth, yet still faint light escaped through the folds, pulsing softly. The glow seemed to beat in rhythm with his heart. A whisper came to him then, faint, almost like the hiss of wind through grass, yet he knew the voice at once. Durin's heir. Thrain's breath caught. He rose, his hand on his axe. "You have no power here," he said into the darkness. "The mountains lie behind me." The whisper grew stronger. "The mountain lives in you. The fire was not quenched. You carry it east." Thrain's fingers trembled. "I bear the forge to cleanse it, to restore what was lost." A low laugh answered him, distant like the echo of a cavern. "Light and fire are one, son of Thror. To wake the forge is to wake me." The voice faded. Thrain stood still for a long while, staring toward the east where the horizon lay veiled in cloud. When at last he sat again, he did not sleep. At dawn, Nar found him pale and silent. The others broke camp in uneasy silence, their glances often straying to the forge wrapped upon the sled. By midday, they had crossed into the western edge of the greenwood, where tall pines rose from the mist and the air smelled of resin and damp earth. The forest was quiet, too quiet. The only sounds were their footsteps and the occasional creak of boughs overhead. Dwalin halted suddenly. "Do you hear that?" All stopped. From somewhere among the trees came a faint clicking sound, like claws upon stone. "Spiders," Nar said grimly. "The spawn of the shadow that grows in the south." They drew their axes and pressed on more swiftly, but the noises followed, growing closer. Once or twice, Thrain glimpsed movement among the trees, shapes gliding through the gloom, silent as mist. As they neared a clearing, the attack came. From above dropped two great spiders, their eyes gleaming with malice. Dwalin met the first with a cry, splitting its leg with his axe. Fundar struck the second, driving it back, but more came, descending on glistening strands. "Keep them from the forge!" Thrain roared. They fought back to back, axes flashing in the dim light. Webbing clung to their arms and faces, and the air filled with hissing. One spider lunged at Thrain, fangs bared, but he swung the forge's sled round and crushed it against a rock. The anvil struck the ground with a thunderous clang, and at once blue fire leapt from its runes. The spiders shrieked and fled, vanishing into the forest's dark. Smoke rose from the anvil's surface, and a faint light spread through the clearing. Nar gazed in awe. "It burns against the shadow." Thrain knelt beside it, breathing hard. "Then perhaps it is not wholly cursed. The fire can yet be turned to our cause." But in the silence that followed, far off among the trees, a new sound stirred. Deeper, heavier, like the tread of something vast. The dwarves froze. Nar's voice was low. "The forest is awake to our passing. We must move swiftly." They bound the forge once more and hurried on, hearts pounding. Above them the branches swayed, though no wind blew, and behind them the echo of that heavy tread followed, until it faded into the distance. When at last they reached the eaves of the wood and looked back, the light of the forge glimmered faintly through the wrappings, steady as a heartbeat. Thrain turned eastward again, the burden of both hope and doom upon his back, and though none spoke it aloud, each felt that the fire of Moria had not been left behind. It had followed them, unseen, in the heart of the forge and the blood of Durin's heir. The journey through the greenwood grew longer and darker than Thrain had foreseen. What had once been the great forest of the east was now sickened by shadow. The trees rose close and tall, their branches entwined so thickly that little light reached the ground. Moss hung from them like old cobwebs, and the air was heavy with the scent of damp rot. The dwarves spoke little, for every sound seemed to stir the forest's brooding silence. Their path wound northward, skirting the darker heart of the woods where none dared tread. Each day they rose before dawn, walking until their legs ached, then made camp beside whatever stream or hollow they could find. The forge anvil of Durin rode behind them on its sled, bound in thick cloth, but even hidden so, its strange light would glimmer faintly at night, setting the mist aglow. Dwalin was the first to speak of it. "That glow grows brighter," he said one evening, as they rested beneath an ancient oak whose roots curled like the limbs of a sleeping beast. "Each night the cloth burns warmer to the touch. It is as though the thing wakes again." Nar frowned but said nothing. Thrain only stared into the fire, his thoughts far away. He had not spoken much since the voice in the ruins. There was a weight in his eyes, a shadow that deepened by the day. When he slept, he tossed and muttered, and sometimes the others heard him speak words in Kuzdul that none among them understood. On the 7th night beneath the trees, rain fell. They made camp in a hollow beneath a stone ridge where water dripped from the moss above. Thunder rolled far off, and flashes of lightning revealed the endless press of trunks and roots beyond. The forge lay between them, its wrappings steaming faintly. Nar crouched beside it, tracing a rune upon its edge with his finger. "Thrain," he said softly, "this relic is bound to you. Tell me truly. Does it speak still?" Thrain's gaze lifted from the fire. His face was drawn, and his eyes gleamed with a strange light. "Sometimes," he said, "in dreams and in waking, it calls to me as a forge calls to the hammer. I feel it beneath my skin, the pulse of flame. It tells me the line of Durin was never meant to fade." Dwalin shifted uneasily. No good ever came from listening to voices born of shadow. But Thrain's voice grew harder. "It is not shadow, it is power. Durin himself drew fire from the depths and shaped it into light. Perhaps this is the same gift long forgotten." Nar rose, anger flashing in his eyes. "You know not what you speak. The fire that burned in Moria was no forge fire. It was the ruin of our kind. Do not mistake wrath for craft, Thrain." Thunder shook the forest, and for a long moment neither spoke. Then Thrain looked away, his voice low. "Perhaps. But if this fire can be tamed, it may yet restore what was lost." Nar's anger faded to sorrow. "I have walked beside too many kings who thought they could master the dark. None did. That night the storm broke fully. Rain hammered upon the leaves, and the wind tore through the branches with a sound like distant wailing. The fire died, and they huddled in the dark, shivering beneath their cloaks. It was in that hour that the forest itself seemed to stir. The rain lessened, and the wind died to silence. Then, faintly, from beyond the trees, came a dull ringing sound, metal striking stone. Dwalin sat up sharply. "What is that?" They listened. Again came the sound. Clang, clang, slow and deliberate, echoing through the trees. Thrain rose to his feet. "A forge," he whispered. "There's a forge in this wood." Nar caught his arm. "No forge burns here. That is a snare. Stay." But Thrain shook him off and stepped into the rain, eyes fixed upon the sound. The others called after him, yet he did not turn. Lantern in hand, he vanished among the trees, his figure soon lost to the mist. The sound grew louder as he went, the steady beat of hammer on anvil, ringing like the heartbeat of the world. Through the fog, a light shone, red and golden, flickering between the trunks. He followed it, stumbling over roots and stones until he came into a clearing. There, beneath a leaning oak, stood a forge of black iron, and at it a figure toiled, a dwarf, broad and strong, his beard gleaming like silver fire. Thrain halted, his heart pounding. "Who are you?" The figure looked up. His eyes burned like molten metal, and in his hand was a hammer that glowed white-hot. "Do you not know me, son of Thror?" he said. "I am the hand that shaped your father's crown. I am the spirit of the forge you carry." Thrain fell to his knees. "Durin," the figure smiled faintly. "Durin is gone, but his fire endures. You carry it east, as was meant. The world grows cold and hollow, but through you the flame may live again. You need only free it." Thrain's eyes glimmered. "Free it? How?" The figure extended his hand. "Cast off the bindings that chain the forge. Let it breathe. Let the fire within rise, and you shall be king beneath a mountain of light." Thrain hesitated. The promise burned in his heart like wine. Then Nar's voice echoed in his memory. "None can master the dark." He stepped back. "No," he whispered. "You are not Durin." The figure's smile vanished, and his eyes flared with white fire. "Foolish heir, you cannot deny what you are. The fire is yours. It has already chosen." Flame burst from the ground, searing the air. The trees twisted, and the figure's form changed, growing vast and shadowed. It reached toward Thrain, but he raised his axe and struck at the image. There was a sound like shattering glass, and the vision vanished. Thrain fell upon the wet ground, gasping. Around him, the forest was dark once more, the forge gone. Only the rain fell, and the echo of his own heart. When he staggered back to camp, dawn was breaking pale through the mist. Nar met him with a cry of relief, but when he saw Thrain's face, his words died. "What have you seen?" he asked. Thrain sank beside the dying fire. "I saw what waits within the forge. It takes the shape of Durin, but it is not he. It would make me its vessel." Nar bowed his head. "Then the curse runs deeper than I feared." For 2 days more they pressed on, moving with haste through the thinning woods. The air grew clearer, and the ground began to rise. At last they emerged upon the open plains east of the forest, where the wind swept clean and cold across the grasslands. There, far away, the lonely mountain gleamed faintly beneath a veil of cloud. Dwalin gave a cry of wonder. "Erebor! We are near home at last." But Thrain's eyes were shadowed still. He looked not at the mountain's crown of snow, but at the forge that lay wrapped beside him. Beneath the cloth, faint light pulsed like the beat of a living heart. "The fire will not rest," he murmured. "It follows us still." Nar laid a hand on his arm. "Then we will carry it home, and there we will bind it with stone and rune, so that never again shall it burn beneath the world." Thrain nodded, though his gaze remained fixed on the east, for even as he looked upon the mountain of his fathers, he felt the whisper rise again, soft, insistent, and burning in the blood. "The mountain sleeps. The fire waits. Wake it, heir of Durin. Wake it, and be king." He said nothing of it, but in his heart the flame stirred anew. And though the dark of Moria lay far behind, the true battle had only just begun. The days that followed were clear and cold, the wide plains stretching before them like a sea of withered grass. The dwarves walked in silence, their eyes fixed upon the east, where the lonely mountain rose from the earth like a grey crown upon the horizon. Each dawn brought it nearer, though to Thrain it seemed to retreat at sunset, as though the mountain itself shunned his coming. They made camp by night beside lonely barrows and streams that whispered over stone. The air was filled with the cries of distant crows, and once, as they passed beneath an ancient hill, they found the remnants of a broken road. Old stones laid by men in forgotten ages, now cracked and overgrown with moss. Thrain said little. The others spoke softly among themselves, their voices hushed by the weight of what had passed. Nar watched his lord with sorrow, for though the heir of Durin walked among them, it seemed at times that something else walked beside him, something unseen. On the 10th evening after leaving the forest, they came upon a hollow in the plains where a ring of low stones rose from the grass. The place seemed untouched by wind or weather, and when they drew near, the forge upon its sled began to hum faintly. Dwalin halted. That sound again. It stirs when we draw near strange ground. Nar knelt and brushed away the grass from one of the stones. Beneath the moss he found runes, faint but unmistakable. "This is no work of men," he murmured. "Kuzdul, of the old kind. These are words of binding." Thrain came forward, his eyes gleaming in the moonlight. "A tomb?" Nar nodded. "Aye, the mark of Thrain the First, your forefather, who built Erebor. He was buried in exile, long before the halls were finished. Few know the place of his rest." A wind swept across the plain, sighing through the stones. The forge upon the sled flickered once with red light. "Then it calls to its own," Thrain said softly. Nar looked up sharply. "Do not speak so. This place is hallowed." But Thrain was already moving among the stones, his fingers tracing the runes. The anvil pulsed brighter with each step, until its glow painted the barrow with firelight. The ground beneath them trembled. From the center of the ring came a deep rumbling, and a seam of red light split the earth. The dwarves leapt back, axes drawn. "Thrain!" Nar shouted. "Step away!" But Thrain didn't move. His face was transfixed by the light that rose before him, shadows twisting in its glow. Out of the earth came a voice, low and resonant, speaking in the ancient tongue of the dwarves. "Who breaks the seal of the first king?" Thrain fell to one knee. "I am Thrain, son of Thror, heir of Durin's line. I come seeking the strength of my fathers." The voice rumbled again, like thunder over stone. "Strength is a double-edged gift, child of fire. What do you seek, to build or to burn?" Thrain hesitated. The wind caught his cloak, and the glow of the anvil threw strange light across his face. "To rebuild the kingdom of my people, to make it as it was before, shadow and ruin. If fire is the price, I will pay it." Nar's voice cut through the wind. "Thrain, do not answer it. That is no king beneath the earth. It is the shadow that has followed us." But Thrain's eyes had already turned red with the reflection of the light. "My blood remembers," he whispered. "Durin's fire flows in my veins. This is my destiny." The fissure widened. From its depths rose a shape like smoke made solid, a figure of stone and flame, its eyes twin embers. It reached toward Thrain with a hand of molten rock. Nar rushed forward, hammer raised, striking at the ground between them. The blow sent up sparks, and the figure recoiled with a hiss. The light faltered. "Back!" Nar cried. "Back to the north stones!" The dwarves dragged Thrain away as the earth shook, and the red glow sank once more into the dark. When it was gone, the plain lay still beneath the moon, and only the forge's faint pulse remained. Thrain slumped against a stone, his breath ragged. "It spoke in Khuzdul," he said, his voice hoarse. "It knew the words of our fathers." Nar's face was stern. "Aye, and so do demons that dwell in the deep. You would do well to remember that." They left the barrow behind them before dawn, their hearts heavy and their steps weary. The land grew rougher as they neared the foothills of Erebor. Trees gave way to bare rock, and cold streams ran from the mountain's roots. The sky above was pale and clear, and in it the lonely mountain loomed vast and grey. By the time they reached its western slopes, their supplies were nearly gone. They followed an old dwarven trail that wound between cliffs until at last they came to a narrow pass overlooking the desolation of Dale, still barren since Smaug's flight decades before. The ruins of men's halls lay silent beneath ash and stone. Thrain gazed upon the mountain's crown, its peak lost in cloud. "Here begins our home," he said softly, "and here it shall rise again." Nar shook his head. "Not yet. Erebor sleeps, and the dragon's bones lie within. To wake such fires again is folly." But Thrain's eyes gleamed with fevered light. "All that sleeps may rise, even flame." That night they camped near a cleft in the mountainside, an old watch hollow once used by miners of Durin's folk. They built no fire, for the wind howled cold through the rocks. Thrain sat apart once more, the forge before him, his hands resting upon it. Nar approached, his heart heavy. "You are changed, Thrain. The fire within you burns too bright. I fear what it seeks." Thrain looked up slowly. "Do you not see, Nar? The fire does not seek to destroy. It seeks to be wielded. The shadow is not its master. It is its remnant. What the Balrog corrupted, we can redeem." Nar's voice broke with sorrow. "It cannot be redeemed. It is of the enemy, born in the fires of the world's first dark. To touch it is to be claimed." Thrain rose, his eyes burning with the forge's reflected glow. "Then I will be claimed. Better fire than ruin. Better to burn bright for one last age than fade into the dark." Nar stepped forward, gripping his hammer. "No, my king, I will not let you doom yourself, or us." For a long moment they faced each other, the wind roaring between them. Then Thrain's gaze softened. "You have ever been my truest friend, Nar. Go then. Take the others and leave me. This burden is mine alone." But Nar did not move. "I swore to your father I would never leave your side." The forge flared suddenly, bathing the rocks in red light. The earth trembled beneath their feet. From the mountain above came a deep, groaning sound, as though something vast stirred in its sleep. Nar turned toward the peak, fear clutching his heart. "The fire calls to the mountain!" Thrain's eyes widened. "No, it answers." A column of flame burst skyward from a fissure in the rock, lighting the slopes with a terrible brilliance. The dwarves shielded their eyes. For an instant, it seemed as though the very heart of Erebor burned anew. Then, as swiftly as it came, the fire vanished, leaving only smoke and silence. When the dwarves looked again, Thrain stood alone beside the forge, his face pale, his eyes alight with a strange, steady glow. Nar whispered, "What have you done?" Thrain turned toward him slowly. "I have woken the fire of my fathers. Erebor will live again." But as he spoke, the mountain groaned once more, deep and long, a sound that was not wholly of stone. And in the wind that followed, there came a whisper, faint and dreadful. "The air of Durin burns, and the fire remembers." The dawn that followed was grey and hollow, the sky heavy with ash and cloud. The mountain loomed vast before them, its sides shrouded in mist, its crown veiled as though by a shroud. The dwarves stirred uneasily, for the ground beneath them was warm, and faint threads of smoke rose from the cracks in the stone. Thrain stood upon a ledge overlooking the plain, the wind tugging at his cloak. In his hands he held the forge of Durin, its runes burning once more with dull fire. His eyes, when he turned toward Nar, shone faintly red in the dawn. Nar's heart sank. "Thrain," he said softly, "whatever you woke last night, it should not have been stirred. The mountain is restless." Thrain's voice was calm, almost distant. Restless, yes. Alive, even. The fire beneath Erebor has slept too long. The bones of Smaug lie in its halls, the air still heavy with his ruin. But fire answers fire. It will cleanse what was defiled. Dwalin and Fundar, who stood near, exchanged uneasy glances. Dwalin spoke first. "We have seen what such cleansing brings, Lord. Moria burns still, though its halls are empty. If you mean to rouse Erebor with the same flame, it may be lost before it's won." Thrain turned, and the faint light of the forge reflected in his eyes. "I will not repeat the folly of Moria. This fire is ours to command, not our bane. I feel it now. It moves as blood within me." Nar stepped forward, gripping his hammer. "You speak as one possessed." "I have seen that look before, Thrain. It was in Thror's eyes before madness took him." The younger dwarves fell silent. Thrain's hand tightened on the anvil's edge. "Mind your tongue, Nar. My father sought gold. I seek rebirth. Would you have our kin live forever in exile, scraping at cold stone, while the halls of our fathers lie silent?" "I would have them live," Nar said, "not burn." For a long moment, the two stood facing one another, the mountain wind sighing between them. Then Thrain turned away, his voice low but firm. "Erebor is not dead. It only sleeps, and I will be the one to wake it." He began the climb upward, along the ancient stair that wound toward the western gate. The others followed in wary silence. Snow fell as they ascended, though the air near the rocks shimmered with heat. The mountain's breath came in gusts of steam from unseen fissures. By midday they reached the gate, still half buried in rubble. The stone arch was scorched black, the marks of Smaug's last fury, visible even after long years. Beyond it lay the dark entrance to the great halls, where no song had sounded since the dragon's fall. Thrain set the forge down before the gate and knelt. "Here Durin's folk shall rise again," he said. Then, raising his axe, he struck it against the anvil. The blow rang like thunder. Sparks flew, scattering across the stones. A deep hum rose from the mountain, echoing through its roots. The dwarves fell back, shielding their eyes. "Thrain, stop!" Nar cried. "The mountain answers. Can you not feel it?" But Thrain struck again, and the runes upon the gate flared to life. The crown and 7 stars of Durin, burning bright upon the stone. The ground shuddered. From within came the echo of falling rock and the faint, far-off roar of wind. Then came a sound deeper still, a rumble that was not of stone, nor wind, nor earth. It was as though something vast had stirred in its slumber. The mountain exhaled a breath of heat, and the snow upon its crown melted in steaming rivulets. Nar staggered back, horror in his eyes. "You have awoken more than stone, Thrain. There is fire still in this mountain, fire that remembers dragons." Thrain's voice was filled with awe. "Then let it remember the hands that shaped it first." He raised his axe for a third strike, but before it could fall, a crack split the gate from crown to base, and through it burst a torrent of flame. The blast hurled them all backward. Dwalin's beard was singed, Fundar's cloak caught fire, and Nar was flung against the rocks. Thrain alone stood unmoved. The fire curled about him like wind, and yet it did not consume him. His hair whipped in the heat, his eyes blazed, and his voice rose above the roar. "Durin's fire," he cried. "By my hand it is claimed!" The blaze poured through the gate like a living thing, swirling around him. For a moment, his figure was lost within it. Then, slowly, the fire drew inward, sinking into the forge and into him. When the light faded, Thrain stood alone amid the smoking stones. Nar crawled to his feet, coughing. "Thrain, what have you done?" The heir of Durin turned toward him, his face pale and his eyes alight with faint fire. "I have bound the flame to my will. The mountain is ours again." Dwalin and Fundar stared in fear and wonder. The trembling of the earth ceased, and the air grew still. The great gate now stood open, the passage beyond lit by a deep, red glow. Thrain took a step forward. "Come, we enter not as exiles, but as kings returned." Nar caught his arm. "Thrain, listen to me. No dwarf should wield such power. You cannot bind fire. It consumes all." Thrain's gaze softened for a heartbeat. "I can. I must." He placed a hand upon Nar's shoulder. "You have ever been my friend, old one. But this path is mine to walk. If the fire takes me, let it be known that I chose it for our people." Then he turned and walked through the gate, the forge blazing faintly in his grasp. Dwalin and Fundar hesitated, then followed, leaving Nar standing alone upon the threshold. He watched them vanish into the red-lit dark. The mountain groaned again, softer now, like a sigh of waking breath. Nar's heart was torn between loyalty and dread. At last, he followed. The halls of Erebor were vast and empty, their pillars cracked, their floors strewn with gold dulled by smoke and age. Yet as Thrain passed, light returned to them. Faint gleams of red and gold flickering across the walls, as though fire moved behind the stone. They came to the great chamber where once the throne of Thror had stood. The dragon's skeleton lay coiled before it, blackened bones gleaming in the dim light. Thrain stopped before it, the forge's glow spilling over the ancient bones. "This was the thief of our glory," he said. "But even he served a purpose. His fire remains in the heart of this mountain. Now it shall serve Durin's line." Nar stepped forward, trembling. "Thrain, no! You cannot draw power from the ruin of a dragon." Thrain's voice was quiet, but resolute. "Watch, and you will see." He placed the forge upon the floor before the throne, and struck it once more with his axe. A deep tone rang out, and the fire beneath the mountain answered. Flames leapt from the cracks in the stone, winding like serpents through the chamber, encircling the bones of Smaug. For a moment, it seemed as if the dragon moved again, its hollow eye sockets burning red. Then the fire rushed upward into the dome above, where it blazed like a sunrise. The dwarves fell to their knees in awe and terror. Nar cried out, "Thrain! Stop before all is lost!" But Thrain's voice rose over the roar of the flame. "I am Durin's heir. The mountain lives because I will it so." The fire surged higher, wrapping around him. His form blazed like molten gold. And then, as swiftly as it had come, the light dimmed. When the smoke cleared, Thrain still stood, but the forge was gone. Only the faint outline of its runes lingered upon the floor, glowing like dying embers. Thrain turned toward them, his eyes no longer red, but bright as new-forged steel. "It is done," he said softly. "The fire sleeps within the stones now. Erebor is reborn." Nar sank to his knees, tears upon his beard. "At what cost, my king?" Thrain looked upon him long and said only, "Ask me when the fire wakes again." Outside, the dawn broke pale over the mountain's peak. The wind carried with it a faint warmth, and the scent of smoke drifted eastward. a whisper of flame that would not be forgotten. The first weeks of their dwelling within Erebor were filled with both labor and unease. Thrain commanded his remaining kin to restore what ruin could be mended, to clear the broken halls, to rekindle the forges, and to gather the remnants of gold and craft left scattered by dragonfire. Yet, though their hands worked with diligence, few among them could shake the feeling that the mountain itself was awake and watching. From deep within its roots there came a faint trembling at times, and a warmth that seemed to breathe through the stone. The air was never still. A whispering draught moved always through the corridors, carrying with it the scent of ash and the distant thrum of something vast and unseen. At first, the dwarves told themselves it was nothing, the stirring of forges after long silence, perhaps the settling of old rock. But in the long watches of the night, Nar would wake to the sound of hammer blows where none worked, and to faint voices speaking words he could not understand. He would rise then and walk the echoing halls until he found Thrain, who now spent most of his hours in the deep chambers beneath the throne. There, he labored alone beside the anvil he had drawn from Moria, though none could say what he forged, for he kept his work hidden and allowed no other to approach. Nar's heart grew heavy with each passing day. Dwalin and Fundar murmured among themselves, saying the king was changed, that fire glowed beneath his skin, and that when he spoke, his voice carried a depth that was not wholly his own. One evening, Nar descended into the deep chambers, though his heart trembled at what he might find. He found Thrain before the forge, his back to the door. The air shimmered with heat, and upon the anvil lay something wrapped in flame. "Thrain," Nar said, his voice echoing in the vastness. Thrain turned slowly. His beard was singed, and his eyes burned with a light like molten gold. "Nar," he said softly, "I have done what none before me dared. The fire that was bound in shadow is now mine to wield." Nar's gaze fell to the object upon the anvil. Beneath the veil of flame, he saw the shape of a crown, wrought of gold and iron intertwined, the metal alive with red light. "What have you forged?" he whispered. Thrain lifted the crown in both hands. A symbol of renewal, the crown of Durin reborn. Through it, the fire will serve the living once more. Nar took a step back. "No, that is no crown of kingship. It is a fetter. You bind yourself to the fire even as it binds to you. Cast it away, Thrain, before it claims you." Thrain's smile was sorrowful. "It has already claimed me. The line of Durin was ever bound to fire. It is our doom and our destiny." Before Nar could speak further, Thrain placed the crown upon his head. The light in the chamber flared, blinding and red, and the very mountain groaned as though in pain. When Nar's sight cleared, Thrain stood tall and still, the crown gleaming upon his brow. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and resonant, echoing through the stone. "Do you feel it, Nar? The mountain lives again. The forges burn without fuel, and the halls hum with power. The fire is no longer our enemy. It is our heart." Nar fell to his knees, overcome by dread. "My king," he said hoarsely, "this power cannot be mastered. It will consume all you love." Thrain's gaze softened for a moment. "Then let it consume me first." He turned away and walked toward the deeper passages, vanishing into the red-lit dark. Days passed, and the fire beneath Erebor grew stronger. The forges blazed without bellows, and molten rivers flowed again through the old channels. Yet the light was wrong. It was too bright, too alive. The dwarves whispered of shapes moving in the heat, of voices calling from the stone. Dwalin came to Nar one night, his face pale. "He speaks to the mountain," he said. I heard him in the great hall, calling it by name, as though it were a living thing. And the mountain answered. Nar gripped his arm. We must stop him. If this continues, Erebor will burn as Moria burned. Together they gathered what few remained loyal and descended into the deeps. The halls were hot as a forge, and the air shimmered like firelight upon water. When they reached the lowest chamber, they beheld a sight that struck fear into their hearts. Thrain stood before the great chasm at the mountain's root, where once Smaug's fire had dwelled. The crown upon his head blazed like a star, and flames rose in spirals around him, licking the walls like living things. He raised his arms. Hear me, spirit of flame. I am Thrain, heir of Durin, master of the fire. In my hands you shall forge a kingdom unbreakable. Nar stepped forward, shouting over the roar. Thrain, stop! The mountain is not yours to command. Thrain turned, and his eyes blazed with the same light as the crown. It is mine by right and by blood. The ground shook, and from the chasm below came a surge of fire, vast and terrible. For an instant it took form, the shadow of a figure towering over them, wings of smoke unfurling, eyes burning white. The dwarves fell to their knees, stricken with terror. Nar cried out, It's the Keeper, you've woken it! Thrain stood unmoved, his voice a roar against the flame. Then let it know its master. He struck the ground with his axe. The fire recoiled, then surged forward again, engulfing him. There was a blinding flash, and the chamber filled with thunder. When the light faded, the Keeper was gone. So too was Thrain. Where he had stood, only the crown remained, lying upon the stone, its light dimming. Nar approached, trembling. The air smelled of smoke and iron. He reached out to touch the crown, but it burned his hand, though no flame was visible. Thrain, he whispered, forgive me. Behind him, the mountain rumbled, and a faint glow rose once more from the chasm, softer now, steady like the beating of a heart. The fire had quieted, but not died. Nar took the crown, wrapping it in cloth, and turned to the others. He is gone, he said. The fire has claimed him. But we must seal this place, lest it claim more. They fled the deeps, sealing every passage with stone and rune. When they emerged into the daylight, the wind was cold and clean. The mountain behind them smoked faintly, but no fire broke forth. Nar looked back once, tears upon his beard. He sought to wake the glory of Durin, and woke the fire instead. May Mahol guard his spirit. He led the survivors down into the vale, and from that day, the halls of Erebor lay silent once more. Yet deep within, in the heart of stone, a faint warmth endured, a whisper of flame waiting. And some who came after would say that on still nights, when the wind swept from the east, they heard the echo of hammer upon anvil beneath the mountain. Thrain's voice calling softly to the fire that had never truly died. Long years passed since the day Thrain was lost beneath the mountain. Seasons turned, and the world beyond Erebor changed. Kings rose and fell, rivers shifted their courses, and the memory of that terrible fire faded into the dim whispers of age. Yet within the halls of the mountain, sealed and silent, the deep heart of stone remembered. It dreamed of flame. Far to the south, in the lands that men now called Rovanion, the exiled dwarves of Durain's line wandered still. Nar, aged beyond his years, dwelt among them. His hair had turned white as frost, his hands rough with time and toil. Often, as the others slept, he would sit beside the campfire and stare northward, toward the shadowed crown of Erebor, its peak faintly glimmering in moonlight. The younger dwarves called him mad. They knew him as the last of those who had followed Thrain into Moria, and then into the mountain. None now believed the old tales, that the fire of the Balrog's kin had taken root in the heart of Erebor, nor that a crown forged of flame still lay hidden beneath its stones. Yet Nar knew. He carried the memory like a wound, and beneath his cloak, in a chest of iron bound with runes of warding, he kept a thing wrapped in blackened cloth, the crown of Thrain, cool now, silent, but never cold. One night, as he sat alone, a stranger came to the edge of the firelight. Tall and lean he was, cloaked in grey, with eyes that glimmered like starlight through mist. "Hail, Nar, son of Narin," the stranger said. "I have walked far to find you." Nar's hand went to his hammer. "Few now know that name. Speak yours before I cast you back into the night." The stranger smiled faintly. "In many tongues I am called by many names, but to your folk I was once Mithrandir." Nar stared, and slowly his hand fell away. "Aye," he murmured, "the grey pilgrim. It is said you walk where shadows fall deepest." "That I do," said the wizard, seating himself upon a stone. "And lately, the shadow that sleeps in your mountain stirs once more." Nar's heart tightened. "You know of it, then? The fire?" "I know enough to fear it," Mithrandir said. "Long have I watched the mountains of the north, and in recent years, strange things have come to pass. Smoke rises from the cracks of Erebor, though no forge burns there. Travelers speak of a low rumble in the earth, and of red light flickering beneath the snow. Tell me truly, old dwarf, what lies sealed beneath your halls?" Nar drew the chest from beneath his cloak and laid it upon the earth. "This," he said, "the crown that Thrain forged from fire. He bound himself to it, and it took him. The mountain has slept since, but I have felt it waking. The heat comes again in dreams." Mithrandir studied the chest long, his face grave. "Such a thing should never have been wrought. The fire that dwells in the deeps is not for mortal hands." "Yet he was mortal," Nar said bitterly, "and a king. He sought to restore what was lost, and in doing so, became what he feared." The wizard looked up at the mountain, where faint sparks glimmered against the clouds. "The shadow of that flame may reach further than you know. It was never wholly slain in Moria, nor wholly banished from the world. The fires of Morgoth's servants are ancient and cunning. They cling to life through memory and greed. Thrain's will gave it a vessel. Through him, it may yet seek another." Nar bowed his head. "Then what is to be done? I have guarded this crown for near 2 centuries. I am old, Mithrandir. My hands grow weak, and my heart is weary. I fear what may come after me." Mithrandir's eyes kindled softly. "There is one yet who might bear the fire without being consumed. His blood is of Durin, though tempered by wisdom. Your king's son, Thrain the Younger, wanders still in the wild, seeking to reclaim his father's halls." At the name, Nar looked up sharply. "Thrain lives? I had thought him lost." "Lost, perhaps, but not gone," said the wizard. "He has heard the mountain's call, though he knows not its meaning. I will find him and warn him of what waits beneath the stone. But first, I must take this thing far from here." He reached for the chest, but Nar laid his hand upon it. "Swear to me," the old dwarf said, "that you will not let it fall into the hands of my kin. No king should wear that crown again." Mithrandir's gaze was steady. "You have my word." Nar sighed, the weight of long years in his breath. "Then take it. Let the fire be buried in some place where even the memory of it cannot reach." The wizard took up the chest, binding it in his cloak. "Rest now, Nar. Your watch is ended." And so it was. When dawn came, the dwarves found the Old One still seated beside the ashes of his fire, his eyes closed, His face turned north toward the mountain. He was cold as stone, but a faint warmth lingered in his hands, as though some unseen fire had passed through him one last time. Mithrandir buried him there upon the plain, beneath a cairn of white stones. Then he turned his face northward and began his long journey toward the mountains of Ered Mithrin, where rumors spoke of a wandering prince of Durin's line. For many days he walked, and the crown's faint warmth pulsed against his side. At times he thought he heard the whisper of a voice from within the iron chest, soft as a sigh. The fire sleeps. The fire remembers. When at last he reached the foothills, he saw the lonely mountain rising far away, its peak shrouded in cloud. Smoke drifted faintly from its crown, and the air smelled of sulphur and iron. The wind that came down from its slopes was warm, and in it was the whisper of distant hammer blows. Mithrandir halted and frowned. "So," he murmured, "the heart of the mountain beats still. Then this is not ended." He turned aside from the path, for he had no wish to wake what slumbered there. Yet even as he walked away, a red flicker glowed upon the horizon, and for an instant it seemed to him that the mountain breathed. Deep within Erebor, beneath the throne and the ashes of Smaug's bones, the last forge of Thrain flared to life once more. The crown that had been carried away had left its mark. The runes upon the stone still pulsed faintly with heat. And in that glow, a shadow moved, formless, waiting. It whispered into the silence, a voice old as the world's first fire. "Durin's blood endures. The air will come. The mountain will burn again." Then the halls fell silent, and the fire sank back into the deep. Yet far above, upon the mountain's peak, a single red spark rose into the dawn, carried by the wind toward the east, and thus began the murmurs of the last great doom of Durin's folk, the whisper that fire, once kindled, never truly dies. Years slipped by like shadows on stone, and the world rolled on into new ages. Yet the memory of fire does not fade easily, and in the hearts of Durin's folk, the call of their lost mountain still burned. Erebor lay silent, or so it was believed. The ruins of Dale remained a graveyard of men, wind-swept and still, and the desolation about the mountain bore no living thing. Travelers who passed near swore they saw lights flickering upon the slopes at night, red and gold, as though some unseen forge burned deep within. None dared approach. Far away in the north, the son of Thrain, Thorin Oakenshield, wandered in exile. His people were scattered, his halls gone, and his kin reduced to wandering smiths and traders. Yet Thorin's heart was not broken. It burned with pride and longing. He often stood upon the cold hills, gazing southward toward Erebor, and in his dreams he heard hammers ringing faintly through stone. It was in those days that Mithrandir the Grey found him. The wizard came quietly, as was his way, and found Thorin in the hall of a northern lord, bent over an anvil, his hands black with soot. "Long have you labored far from home," Mithrandir said, "and yet your eyes turn ever to the south. You would see the halls of your fathers restored, would you not?" Thorin straightened, his face grave. "If I could. But I am not my father. Thrain went to his doom in the deep places, and the mountain is lost to us. Only ruin remains." "Perhaps," said Mithrandir, "but I have walked the ruins, and not all is dead there. Strange things stir again beneath the stone." Thorin frowned. "You speak of dragons?" "No," said the wizard softly. "Of something older. The shadow that haunted your father's blood still lingers. A fire sleeps in the roots of the mountain, and it remembers the hand that woke it." Thorin's brow darkened. I have heard tales of Thrain's madness, how he vanished in the dark and left us to wander. But I do not believe he was wholly lost. His will was strong, and his heart true. Strong, yes, said Mithrandir, and that strength was his doom. He sought to master fire with flesh, and in doing so, he bound more than he knew. The flame beneath Erebor is not mere heat, it is hunger. It waits for Durin's blood. Thorin's eyes kindled. Then it shall wait in vain. I will not be mastered as my father was. If ever I return to the mountain, it will be to rebuild, not to bow. Mithrandir studied him a long moment. I believe you, he said at last. And that is why I tell you this. The fire grows restless. You may yet have need to face it, and more besides. The wizard turned to go, but Thorin called after him. Tell me, Grey One, what became of my father? Mithrandir paused. The wind stirred his cloak, and for a moment he seemed very old. He went into the dark places of the world, bearing the mark of the fire. What he became, none can say. But I have seen what fire does when it takes hold of a dwarf's heart. Then he was gone, leaving Thorin alone with his thoughts. The years that followed were full of toil and gathering. Thorin called his kin from the scattered corners of the north, Balin and Dwalin, his father's companions, Oin and Gloin, sons of the line of Groin, and others whose hearts still yearned for home. Together they forged weapons and planned, waiting for the day when they might reclaim Erebor. Yet sometimes, when Thorin stood alone by the forge fire, he would see shapes in the flames, shadows that twisted into crowns and anvil runes, and voices that whispered, "The mountain waits, the fire remembers." In those days, far beneath Erebor, the fire indeed stirred. The seals that Nar and his company had laid centuries before had grown weak. The crown of Thrain, though carried away, had left its mark upon the mountain's core. The veins of ore ran hot, glowing faintly red through the deepest tunnels, and the stone itself pulsed as though alive. The fire whispered to itself in the tongue of the world's first days. Durin's blood endures. He comes. The heir of the forge returns. It was then that something else awoke. In the deep caverns where Smaug's bones lay entombed, the air began to shimmer with heat. The dragon's bones, long blackened and cracked, shifted faintly. From their hollow eyes flickered a dim red gleam, not of life, but of memory, the echo of the flame that had devoured him. The keeper's fire, once bound, had found a vessel anew. Slowly, over long years, the remnants of that ancient heat wove themselves through the bones and gold, knitting spirit to matter. When at last the shadow took form again, it was not the Balrog reborn, nor the dragon of old, but something between, a spirit of fire, wearing the guise of gold and ash, bound forever to the mountain's heart. It remembered the name of Thrain. It remembered the voice that had woken it. And when the wind howled through the empty gates of Erebor, the sound was like laughter, deep, hollow, and burning. Decades passed. Then came word through the wilds of a company of dwarves marching south, led by Thorin Oakenshield. They sought to reclaim their home. Mithrandir heard the tidings with a heavy heart. He stood upon a high ridge, looking toward the mountain, its peak burning faintly red in the dusk. "So it begins again," he murmured. "The fire calls to its blood." Far below, in the forests of the north, Thorin and his company walked. They spoke of gold and kingdoms, of songs and glory, not knowing that the true treasure of Erebor no longer lay in its gold, but in the ancient flame that waited beneath. When at last they came to the gates, and the wind of the mountain touched their faces, Thorin felt something stir in his chest, a warmth, faint but fierce. He mistook it for pride or the joy of return. But deep below, the fire stirred and whispered, "The heir has come. The line is unbroken. The forge shall burn anew." And far in the east, as night fell, the clouds over the mountain glowed faintly, as though dawn were rising from beneath the earth itself. Yet no dawn ever came that night. Only the slow pulse of red light, beating like the heart of something that could not die, something that had been waiting since the dungeons of Moria for Durin's blood to return. The mountain slept, but it dreamed of flame. The shadow of Erebor lay long across the plain, and the winds that swept its slopes carried both ash and memory. Though years had passed since Thorin Oakenshield reclaimed his birthright, still the mountain was not at peace. Beneath its golden halls and newly kindled forges, the old fire lingered, quiet, patient, and cunning. When the dragon Smaug was slain and his ruin scattered upon the stones, many thought that the evil of Erebor had at last been purged. The songs of men and dwarves alike rang through Dale reborn, and the halls of the Mountain King shone once more with the light of craft and labor. Yet even in joy, some hearts felt a faint unease, for when the forges blazed brightest, a strange heat would rise from the floor, as though a breath stirred from deeper fire below. Balin, ever wise, was the first to speak of it. "The stone grows warm at night," he told Thorin as they walked the echoing corridors of the lower halls. "And there are sounds, the beating of iron, faint and far away." Thorin frowned, his eyes shadowed beneath the crown he wore. "The mountain settles, perhaps. Much was shattered in Smaug's day, and the heat of his bones may linger." But Balin shook his head. "This is no memory of the dragon's fire. The heat is steady, not fading. It comes and goes like a living thing." Thorin said nothing more, but that night he walked alone through the deep ways, where the air trembled faintly and the walls seemed to breathe. He came at last to the great chamber of Thrain, long sealed and long forgotten. There, upon the floor of dark stone, he found old runes scorched into the rock, runes of warding, blackened by fire. He knelt and traced them with his hand. The stone was warm. As his fingers passed over the runes, he felt a pulse, faint, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. "Durin's blood endures." The whisper came not through the air, but within him, as though his own heart had spoken. He rose swiftly, his breath quickened. "Who speaks?" he demanded, his voice echoing through the chamber. Only silence answered. Yet when he turned to leave, the glow of the torches dimmed, and for an instant the stone beneath him flared red. Casting his shadow tall upon the wall, he told no one of what he had heard. But in the days that followed, his temper grew fierce, and his eyes gleamed as his father's had in the end. The gold of Erebor seemed to call to him with a voice he could not silence. It was then that Gandalf returned. The wizard came in secret through the eastern gate, cloaked in grey, his staff in hand. Balin, who still watched the old halls with wary heart, found him and led him to the king. Thorin greeted him in the throne room, where the fires of the great forge burned high and bright. "Mithrandir," he said, though his tone was guarded. "You come unlooked for. What counsel brings you now?" Gandalf's gaze moved slowly about the hall, taking in the shimmer of gold, the gleam of new-wrought mail, and the faint red light that played upon the stone. "I come because the mountain stirs," he said. "You have rebuilt your kingdom, Thorin, son of Thrain, but you have not cleansed it. There is an old wound beneath your feet, and it bleeds still." Thorin's eyes narrowed. "You speak in riddles. The dragon is dead, the curse lifted. Erebor is ours again." The wizard stepped closer, his voice low. "It is not Smaug I speak of, but the fire your fathers kindled before him. Thrain's forge burns still beneath these halls, though it has no hand to tend it. The flame is bound to the mountain's heart, and it calls to you, as it called to him." Thorin turned away sharply, his cloak sweeping the floor. "Old tales and smoke. You would have me live in fear of my own house? I am no mad king of shadow and flame. I have seen that doom, and I will not wear it." "Then heed me," Gandalf said. "Seal the deep halls once more. Leave the lowest chambers untouched. The fire that sleeps there will not be quenched by pride or steel. It must be buried in silence and cold, else it will wake again, and when it does, it will not know friend from foe." But Thorin's pride was like tempered iron. "You forget to whom you speak," he said coldly. "I am the king under the mountain. No fire, no shadow, no whisper of ghosts shall drive me from my own throne." Gandalf sighed. "So spoke your father once." He turned, his face weary. "I have said what I must. May the Valar guard you, Thorin Oakenshield. For if the fire wakes, it will not be content with kingship. It will seek to forge anew the world itself." With that, he departed, his cloak vanishing into the shadows of the gate. Winter fell upon the north, and the snows buried the valleys deep. Within Erebor, the forges blazed day and night. Gold flowed once more through the halls, and the songs of dwarves echoed as in ages past. Yet always beneath the singing was a faint thrum, a heartbeat of fire. One night, when the wind howled fiercest outside, and the mountain groaned beneath the weight of snow, Thorin dreamt. In his dream, he stood in a vast hall of flame. Shadows moved about him, whispering in Khuzdul older than words. Before him rose a figure, a dwarf tall and proud, his beard white as molten silver, his eyes like living coals. "Father," Thorin whispered. Thrain looked upon him and smiled. "My son, you have brought the fire home." Thorin fell to his knees. "I would see it mastered, father, not as it mastered you." Thrain's shadow lengthened, and the fire burned brighter. "There is no mastery of flame. There is only shaping or being shaped. The forge does not ask, it consumes, but in its fire, even ruin may be remade." The light grew blinding. The crown of Thrain appeared upon his brow, gleaming red. "Take it," the voice said. "Be the true heir of Durin. Let the mountain live through you." Thorin awoke with a cry. Sweat ran down his face, though the air was cold. The fire in the forges roared louder, as if stirred by his breath. From that night forth, the heat within the halls grew unbearable. The gold upon the floors grew warm to the touch, and in the lowest deeps, unseen by any living eye, cracks spread through the stone, glowing red like veins of molten blood. Balin went to the king, fear in his voice. "My lord, the mountain burns within. The walls sweat, the air shimmers. This is no forge fire. This is something older." Thorin looked down from his throne, his face pale yet proud. "Then let it burn. Erebor was born of fire, and by fire it shall endure." And as he spoke, a faint rumble passed through the hall, and the torches flickered, though no wind stirred. In the dark beneath the throne, where the runes of Thrain lay blackened, a single ember flared to life, the first breath of the old fire awakening once more. It whispered in the language of the deep. "Durin's air has kindled the forge anew. The mountain remembers. The flame is not done." Outside, dawn broke over the snows, pale and cold, but upon the peak of Erebor, a thin trail of smoke rose into the wind, red as blood against the morning sky. The spring that followed was brief and wild upon the slopes of Erebor. Rain fell, but it hissed upon the stone as though the mountain itself rejected it, and the rivers that once ran bright with snowmelt flowed now with warmth, steaming faintly as they wound through the dale. The men of Dale spoke in whispers of the heat that came from beneath the earth. The smiths of the dwarves found their metals softened even when cold, and strange red veins glimmered through the rock in the deepest mines. Balin went often to the throne room, but Thorin grew harder to find. The king spent long hours alone in the deep chambers where no others dared tread, walking the paths his father once sealed. Each time he returned, his eyes were brighter, his voice lower and more measured, as if weighed by something unseen. At night, the mountain shook. The first great tremor came when the moon was full. The torches in the halls swayed, the forges roared without bellows, and the air glowed faintly red. Dwarves fled from the lower mines, swearing they had seen shapes moving in the stone, shadows that glimmered as molten metal does before the hammer. When morning came, the mountain was still again. But the heat didn't fade. In those days, Gandalf came once more to the lonely mountain. He found Balin waiting at the gate, his face lined with worry. "You warned him," said Balin, his voice low. "He would not listen." The wizard's eyes darkened. "So I feared. The fire that dwells here is not bound by will, nor craft, nor crown. It feeds upon the hearts of those who seek to master it." "Then speak to him," Balin urged. "He still trusts you more than most." Gandalf did not answer at once. He stood upon the threshold and looked within. The air shimmered with heat. Deep in the mountain, he felt the pulse of something vast. "I will speak," he said at last. "But I fear the fire listens also." He descended through the great corridors, the clang of his staff echoing like thunder. When he reached the forges, he found Thorin there alone. The king stood before the largest hearth, his hands upon the anvil, his hair clinging with sweat. The heat was near unbearable, yet Thorin didn't flinch. "Mithrandir," he said without turning, "you come again to doubt me." "I come to save you," Gandalf replied. "The mountain burns beneath your feet. The same flame that consumed your father now seeks you." Thorin's voice was calm, too calm. "It is no curse. It is the strength of Durin's folk. What my father began, I will finish." "You think you command it," said Gandalf, stepping nearer. "But already it commands you. Look at yourself, Thorin. You have not slept, nor eaten, in days. The fire speaks to you, does it not?" Thorin turned then, and the wizard drew a sharp breath. His eyes were rimmed with light, faintly golden, like metal seen through flame. "It speaks," Thorin admitted, "but not as an enemy. It shows me the heart of the mountain. It tells me what must be done." "And what does it tell you?" Thorin's hand fell upon the haft of his axe. "That the world grows cold and weak, that the craft of dwarves wanes, the glory of men fades, and the old powers of the earth sleep while darkness creeps in the west. But I shall not sleep. I will forge a fire to drive back the shadow. The flame beneath Erebor will rise again. For good, not for ruin." Gandalf's eyes blazed with sorrow. "You would use the fire of Morgoth himself to fight darkness. That is folly beyond words. You cannot turn the shadow's tools to light." Thorin's laughter was low, hollow. "You call it Morgoth's fire because you fear it. But flame is not evil, Mithrandir. Fire gives life as easily as it destroys. Perhaps you, too, have forgotten what it means to forge." He turned back to the anvil. Upon it lay a shape beneath a covering of cloth. When Thorin drew the cloth aside, Gandalf beheld a crown of iron and gold, its runes blazing faintly red. the twin of Thrain's lost work. "No," the wizard breathed. "You have wrought it anew." Thorin lifted the crown, and its light danced across his face. "I am the king under the mountain. The fire obeys me." Gandalf raised his staff, his voice sharp. "Cast it away, Thorin. You do not know what sleeps within that gold." But Thorin set the crown upon his brow. The air thundered, and the ground beneath them shook. The forge roared like a living thing, and the flames leapt high. Gandalf was hurled back by the heat. The voice that spoke then was not Thorin's. It was deep and echoing, as if born from the stone itself. "Durin's air calls and the fire answers. The forge is awake." The mountain trembled to its roots. In the deepest vaults, veins of molten rock split the stone, glowing brighter than any forge fire. From cracks in the walls poured streams of light that wove through the halls like rivers of gold. The dwarves fled in terror as the very air shimmered with heat. Gandalf rose, shielding his eyes. "Thorin, resist it! Remember who you are!" For an instant, the fire dimmed. Thorin's face showed beneath the crown, pale and torn between pride and pain. I am Thorin Oakenshield, son of Thrain." The crown's light flared again, swallowing his words. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the tremor ceased. The flames sank back into the hearths, the red glow fading. When the smoke cleared, Thorin lay upon the stone floor, the crown beside him, cold and dark once more. Gandalf knelt beside him, fearing what he might see. But the king breathed still, though weakly. When his eyes opened, they were his own again, grey and weary. "Mithrandir," he whispered. "I saw it. The fire. It knows my name." "Then forget it," said Gandalf. "Let it sleep, as your father should have. The mountain's heart is not for the hands of kings." Thorin's hand closed around the wizard's sleeve. "You cannot bury a mountain. The fire will rise again. Not in me, but in another. It is bound to Durin's line." Gandalf said nothing. He lifted the crown, wrapping it in his cloak. "Then I will see that it ends with you." The days that followed were heavy with silence. Thorin recovered slowly, though his strength was lessened. The forges of Erebor were stilled, their fires quenched by his command. Yet deep below, where no hammer rang, a faint glow still pulsed in the rock. Balin spoke softly to the king one evening, as the sun set over the dale. "We have sealed the deep halls again, as you ordered. But there are whispers in the night. Some say they hear the mountain breathing." Thorin looked toward the gates, his face unreadable. "Let it breathe," he said. "So long as it sleeps." But as the years passed, the red veins in the stone didn't fade. When Thorin walked the halls alone, he would sometimes feel the warmth rise beneath his feet, and in the stillness of the night, he thought he heard his father's voice. The fire remembers. He told no one. And far below, in the forgotten chambers of Thrain, where even the wizard's seals could not reach, the molten veins converged upon a single blackened stone, the first anvil of Durin. Upon it glimmered the faintest spark, a breath, a heartbeat. The mountain was dreaming again. The years of Thorin's reign waned, and peace lay heavy upon Erebor, a peace that was not rest, but waiting. The mountain shone once more with gold and song, and the halls echoed with the sound of hammers. Yet beneath that splendor there was always the quiet pulse of something unseen, something breathing in the stone. The dwarves spoke no longer of the heat that crept through the lower chambers. The king forbade such talk, and none dared defy him. Still, miners swore that the veins of ore ran red with light, and that when they struck too deep, a sound like a sigh rose from below, not of air but of fire. Thorin himself grew more withdrawn. Age had not yet stooped him, but his hair was streaked with silver, and the pride that once blazed in his eyes had dimmed to a wary watchfulness. Often he walked alone upon the high terraces, gazing eastward as if listening to some distant call. At times, when he passed through the deepest forges, the flame would leap higher, as though stirred by his shadow. Balin remained his closest friend and counselor. Yet even Balin's words could not ease the unease that lingered between them. "My king," Balin said one night, as they stood upon the gate and looked down upon the sleeping Dale. "The men of Dale have begun to speak again of the old tales, of fire in the mountain, of red light in the clouds. They say Erebor is not healed, but haunted." Thorin's gaze did not waver. "Let them speak. They see only what the mountain shows them, not what it keeps." "And what does it keep?" Balin asked softly. For a long moment, Thorin said nothing. The wind moaned across the gate, carrying with it the faint scent of iron. Then the king turned, and his eyes gleamed in the torchlight. "A promise," he said, "and a curse." Winter returned, colder than any in memory. Snow buried the valley, and the river that ran from the mountain froze upon its banks. Inside, the forges were stilled, for no flame would take. Not even when oil was poured upon the coals, the dwarves whispered in fear, for the fires of Erebor had never failed. Then, upon the seventh night of darkness, the silence was broken by a sound that came from the roots of the mountain. A single, deep note like the strike of a hammer upon an anvil. The walls trembled, and the air grew warm once more. Thorin was in his chamber when the sound came. He rose, his heart pounding. A red glow seeped through the cracks of the floor, and the old whisper stirred within him. Durin's blood endures. The forge remembers. He called for no guard, no companion. Taking up Orcrist, his sword, he went alone into the deeps. The passages were lit by no torch, yet the walls glimmered with an inner fire, faint but steady. He descended farther than he ever had before, past the sealed doors, past the forgotten runes of Thrain, until at last he came to the lowest hall of all. There, in the blackness, the anvil of Durin stood, the first stone shaped by his ancestors in ages uncounted. It glowed now with a slow, molten light, and above it hung a shape like smoke given form, shifting and coiling in the air. Thorin raised his sword. "Show yourself," he said. The shadow laughed, a deep, echoing sound that filled the chamber. "Do you not know me, son of Thrain? I have worn many shapes, but my fire has always been your companion." "I know what you are," said Thorin. "You are the remnant of the Keeper, the flame that devoured Moria, the fire that took my father." "And yet," the voice murmured, "you came to me all the same. You cannot deny the blood that calls to fire." Thorin's grip tightened on his sword. "You will not take me as you took him." The flame drew closer, swirling around the anvil. "Take, no. I would make you whole. The line of Durin was born in fire and shall end in it. Through you, I shall live again, and the world will remember the dwarves as they were, unyielding, unbroken, eternal." The heat grew unbearable, the stone beneath Thorin's feet glowing red. His breath came in gasps, his vision blurred with light, yet still he stood, defying it. "You lie," he said. "You promise strength, but bring only ruin. You are no fire of creation. You are the hunger that devours it." For the first time, the shadow faltered. Its laughter faded to a hiss. "You speak as one who has seen too little. I am the forge that shapes all things, even kings." Thorin raised Orcrist high, and its blade flared white. "Then let this be your end." He struck. The sword met the anvil with a cry like thunder, and the fire burst outward, filling the hall. The light poured through every crack and tunnel of the mountain, and the dwarves above cried out as the very walls shone red. Then the light was gone. When the dwarves dared descend at last, they found the lowest chamber sealed by glassy rock, molten and smooth as the surface of a great gem. At its heart stood Thorin Oakenshield, motionless, his sword still in his hand, the fire frozen about him like a statue of gold and flame. His face was calm, his eyes closed, as though in sleep. Balin fell to his knees and wept. "He has bound it," he said. "He has bound the fire within himself." Gandalf came soon after, for word of the light had reached even his distant road. He looked upon Thorin and bowed his head. "So ends the line of Thrain," he said softly. "He held the flame until it could burn no further. The mountain is his tomb and his triumph." The dwarves sealed the deep hall forever, and upon the doors they carved runes of mourning and warning. Here lies Thorin, who tamed the fire of his fathers and forged peace from ruin. Years passed, and Erebor endured. The gold cooled, the halls quieted, and the heat beneath the mountain faded at last. Yet in the stillness of certain nights, when all torches were out, and only the wind moved through the gates, the dwarves swore they heard the faint ring of hammer upon anvil, echoing from the deeps. They said it was the king working still, shaping the mountain from within, keeping its heart from waking again. And high above, where the snow lay white upon the peak, the faintest warmth always lingered beneath the ice, a memory of fire that would not die. Thus ended the tale of the dungeons of Moria and the fire of Durin's line, a story of stone and shadow, of greed and redemption, of a flame that passed from father to son until it found its rest. What the dungeons of Moria keep is no longer gold nor relics, but a warning. For the hands that shape the world's fire must ever beware, lest they become its fuel. Yet still, in the secret hearts of the dwarves, the dream endures, that one day, when the world grows cold and the stars fade, the forges of Durin will blaze again, and the mountain will awaken, not to ruin, but to song.
Ну що ж, рідня, це мій був погляд на те, що насправді приховувало підземелля Морії. Історія про те, що деякі двері краще ніколи не відчиняти, а деякий вогонь не варто роздмухувати. Мені цікава ваша думка, чи шлях дався вам трагічнішим. Хто був трагічніший: батько, який прагнув влади, чи син, який мусив її приборкати ціною власного життя. Не забувайте тиснути на дзвіночок, підписуватись, щоб не пропускати нові історії від мене. Звісно, можете ділитись цим відео з друзями, які люблять всесвіт володаря кілець. Дякую за перегляд. Нехай ваші ковадла ніколи не холонуть.